This story begins with a dream of a beautiful girl. A guy was on stage singing a song that everyone in that hall knew. The fans, as soon as they heard Ra-un singing the song, they started singing along and beeping with joy because they loved this singer so much. Our heroine stood behind the scenes and watched it all. The girl missed those moments very much. When they understood each other without further ado, Ra-un's favorite dishes that he so graciously shared. The warmers that were handed out to those eager to record with him. The girl still can't believe that she no longer feels that friendly atmosphere. But at that moment, the organizer suddenly came up to the girl and said that her exit was next. She didn't realize when she started thinking that, but now her place was there on the stage. She was on the same stage with Ra-un. The girl was about to start singing songs, but suddenly someone ran onto the stage. The guy ran out and grabbed her shoulder. After that, he started to say something, but the girl could not understand his words. And then she opened her eyes. When she looked around, she realized it was just a dream, and she was in her room. The girl quickly turned off the alarm clock, which just so happened to wake her up. It was 7 o'clock in the morning. Then she took a jar that contained some kind of critter. It was called bubblegum, and the girl asked him how he slept because she had dreamed about Ra-un. She pulled herself closer and said she woke up because some strange guy had shown up. She doesn't know who it was, and she didn't remember his face. It was a blur in her mind. But at that moment, a notification came to the girl's phone that she had a meeting scheduled at a cafe. The girl immediately realized that this was not the time to talk about dreams, or she would be late, and that wouldn't be nice. Then she quickly got dressed and took her bag. Soon she started walking towards the street where the meeting was planned, but she couldn't find the cafe. But then, all of a sudden, when she went behind the alley, she saw some guy sitting on a motorcycle, and she thought, is he really a student of their school? And he had an electronic cigarette in his hands. She was very surprised by this and thought, maybe he's some kind of gangster. But next to him was a little kitty who was eating from the feeder, and when she saw the girl, she immediately began to approach her. She was immediately distracted by the cute animal, but at that moment, this unknown guy came closer to her. They looked at each other intently in the eyes, but said nothing. They looked a lot like girls, but she couldn't tell where she'd seen them before. Then the guy was very surprised and asked why she was looking at him so intently. Does she want an autograph? The girl was very surprised and thought to herself that of course she didn't need an autograph, and said, who was he anyway that she should ask him for a scribble? When the stranger heard this, he even got angry and asked her what she was saying. The girl was very frightened and thought that she didn't realize how it had come out. But afterward she saw that on the mask he was wearing, there was a piece of wool there, and she said she would help him clean it up. But the moment she was about to remove a hair, the guy slapped her on the arm and told her to get off his back. The girl thought he was kind of rude, and then that she didn't recall such a person being in their school. Well, then she looked at the time and realized that she had only wasted it, for she must get the glass with Ra-un. Soon, the girl finally arrived at the cafe where the event was held. There were already many young people who were Ra-un's fans. This celebration was held in honor of the 555th day after the debut. Then all of a sudden, another woman approached Sid, our main character. Her name was An Hye-ji, and she was a fanatic to the core. An Hye smiled and said that they prepared so many interesting things for the event for the fans. Sid agreed, and said she was just in time to grab a cup with Ra-un's face on it, and while showing it to her friend, she asked if it was pretty. Her friend showed the pics and said he looked so cool in them, also double-sided. You can go crazy with how happy she is. These two girls were his truest fans and were willing to give their souls to meet him. Then they went outside to go to school. An Hye was walking in front and suddenly she saw their bus pull up. The girl immediately took her friend by the hand and led her to the bus, telling her that if they didn't make it in time, they would be late for school. An Hye, as soon as she entered the bus, immediately saw an empty seat, Then she was the first to run in and take it. Sid, who continued to stand near the door, looked with contempt at her friend, and thought she had taken her and brazenly abandoned her by taking the only seat. Soon they were on their way. When the bus stopped at the next stop, a guy suddenly came in. He immediately attached his card, which was already paid for the fare. When the girls looked at the man who had entered, they recognized him immediately. Not only them, everyone on the bus was shocked when they saw Kang Ji-han. They didn't understand why he was riding the bus. But Sid, seeing this guy, immediately remembered that this was exactly the thug she had seen before going to the cafe. Then Kang Ji walked over and stood next to her. The girl was very frightened. She didn't understand why he chose to stand next to her instead, because there were others. Then An Hae suddenly started texting her. She said it was Kang Ji-han after all and asked what it was like to stand next to him. But Sid was surprised and asked who she meant by the one standing next to her now. But her friend was very surprised and asked how she could not know him at all. The girl wondered, is he famous? But the friend laughed in messages and said that she would explain everything to her now. An Hye-ji wrote that Kang Ji-han is the son of the CEO of an international entertainment company. And he's also an actor from Diapers, one of the best child actors who has found success in whatever he takes on. And because of his outstanding abilities, he is also the face of a very famous clothing brand. He starred in a TV series that became popular all over the world, but everyone at their school knows that on-screen and real life are two different people. Sid wondered why that was. Then the friend explained that he was very ugly and was on the verge of bankruptcy at one time. Then An Hae sent her a YouTube video and told her to watch it better. The headline was about a sex scandal involving the grandson of PC Group president Kap Ji-han. The girl reading the headline was very surprised that he was in a sex scandal. When she caught a glimpse of him and noticed he was looking straight at her phone, that's when Sid got a new notification. It was a friend. She said she sent her this link. However, it was too late. Kang Ji had already noticed what she was looking at on her phone, so the guy moved closer to her. And afterward, with menace in his voice, he asked if she was having fun. Sid already wanted to justify his actions and said he just misunderstood. But the guy wasn't listening to her. He quickly pressed the button to stop the bus and got off. Sid yelled back at him that he had just misunderstood and started to apologize, but he couldn't hear her anymore. An Hae, seeing her friend's frightened face, immediately went over to her and asked if the girl was okay. But Sid's only thought was that he had misunderstood her, but it couldn't be helped. They wouldn't see each other again anyway. That's certainly what she thought. But it turned out to be a mistake. Because when they got to class, Kang Ji sat right next to her at the desk. But 10 minutes before, the teacher turned to the class and said that Ji-han was returning to class from this day forward. The guy stood behind her, and the girl told them not to bother him too much with their questions, but just to help him adapt. Then the teacher father was watching the class and said there was an empty seat next to Sid, so he could sit there. Exercise remained the choice. He smiled and sat down next to her after all. At this moment, Sid was very uncomfortable, especially because of the situation that had happened in the morning. Then she looked at him for a moment and thought she should apologize after all. She was watching the video right under his nose, and he might think she'd done it on purpose. But at that moment, Kang Ji rudely asked why she kept looking at him like that. Then he lay back on the desk and, smiling, asked if she really wanted to sleep with him. The girl was shocked when she heard this, but she immediately said that not at all. She hadn't even considered such a thing. After calming down a bit, Sid said she was changing a lot and asked if he was in a bad mood because of that incident. But the guy didn't say anything to that. He just stared at her for a while and then he turned away. Sid was very angry with him, but then suddenly the girl who was sitting in front of them spoke. She said hello to someone. It was Chu-yi. The girl said hello to her subscribers and said that she hadn't aired in a while and missed them a lot. Chuye was an aspiring influencer and was just gaining her popularity on social media. Then the girl smiled and said that they were probably aware that she had a friend who was a celebrity. And without waiting for responses from her subscribers, she immediately turned the camera over to Kang Ji. She greeted him and asked him to say hello to her subscribers. The guy was shocked. He didn't expect her to start filming him. But at that moment, Chu Ye's followers started to grow, and she said that she had already told them that she and Ji Han were best friends since middle school. Then she pointed to her phone and asked for the guy to say something to her on the air. But Ji Hyun didn't say anything. He just walked out of the classroom. The girl, seeing this, smiled evilly. It was obvious that she was up to something. When there was a break, she and her friend were in the restroom getting cleaned up. The girl said that she must have embarrassed him with her broadcast. Chu Ye, who was just putting lip gloss on herself, said that she had thought of that too. Jihan is a world-class star, and if he appeared on live TV, he might have a problem with the agency. Her girlfriend was surprised and now realized what was wrong, but she thought they weren't that close. Chu Ye asked what she was talking about. After all, they had even met last night. Then she showed her friend the correspondence where Jihan wrote that he was very tired from filming and asked if he could drop by her place. The girl told him to call him when he was done. Her friend was shocked when she read all this. She asked if Kang Ji-han had really come to see her. The girl, pleased with herself, said it was surprising, but he often stopped by to see her. The girl was upset and said she was very jealous, and then she asked him if he was even prettier in real life. Chu Ye replied that that's right, they are very close. The friend then inquired and asked, but they weren't just friends after all. The girl smiled playfully and said that they might be. She also added that they agreed to meet after lunch on the rooftop. Apparently, he wants to confess to her. Then the girl thought about the fact that if she were to date Kang Ji-han himself, her number of subscribers would increase a lot. When the students had lunch, Sid and her friend went outside. Another girl met them, and when she saw what she saw, she was shocked. It was Hong Ju-an. She was also the head of the class and was the smartest in the school. The girl was very happy and said she was so touched because she thought she had missed everything. The girl held up the cards Sid had given her, and he then mockingly asked how she could even sleep well on a day like this. Wasn't he the only outlet in her life? Hongju looked at her new cards and told her to watch her tongue and not say nasty things about Sura. Then the girl smiled and said that it was just funny, because even if she plugged her ears, she could still hear her chattering. Well, and the headman did not listen to her. She continued to admire her card and asked if they could take a photo together because he was so handsome. The girls loved the idea, so they all pulled out their cutie cards and took pictures of them. As Sidya was unpacking her bun to eat breakfast, An Hye suddenly approached her and asked if she should be friends with Kang Ji-han after all. Sid, smiling, said not at all. She was going to continue to just avoid him. Then her friend laughed again and said that she had surprised her then very much, for how could one not know him at all? Then Hongju intervened in their conversation, as she finished looking at her cards and asked in surprise if she didn't know who Kang Ji-han was. Heading towards the school, she said that she had already said that she came from a fishing village, so she hadn't heard of them. But at that moment, the girl suddenly got a notification. When she looked at it, she saw that her mom was calling her. Sid didn't pick up the phone from her. She just put the phone away. She actually had a secret from her friends that no one knew about, namely that she had run away from home. When the girl got another notice, it was also from her mom. She asked if Sid was going to come home yet. As the girl passed by the windows, she suddenly heard someone shouting for her to be careful. Sid looked up and saw some guy flying at her. But she wasn't at all confused. Throwing her bun away, she was able to catch this guy and accidentally even cracked the asphalt under her feet. In fact, the girl compared to other people was very strong. Then she looked at the person she was holding in her arms and managed to save from certain death. Tao was shocked because Kang Ji-han was now in her arms. Sometime before his extravaganza fall, the guy was standing on the roof. He was talking to someone on the phone and eating an apple. Kang Ji-han was talking to his manager. The man laughed and said that he had heard about him coming to school by bus. He also added that he could give him a ride safely. But the guy objected and said that if he gave him a ride, everyone would think that he was too much of an asshole. But his manager objected and said it didn't matter. And after that, he asked how school was going for him after such a long break. Kang Ji-han sighed and said terribly. His interlocutor was surprised and asked then why he suddenly decided to come back. The guy said that he didn't know. But the manager told him to be careful, because he was the face of the company. Young people are not scary nowadays, and if he does something wrong, it's all over. And he said that not even his father, not even the CEO himself could fix all of this. Well then Kang Ji, hearing that someone had come to see him and he was no longer alone, then told his interlocutor that he was putting on the tube. Then he saw the girl in front of him. She smiled and said that she had found him after all. He hung up the phone and looked at her angrily, asking if she was at it again, and also why she had come at all. The girl was surprised and asked how it was why she, after all, she just wanted to see him, nothing like that. And then she asked him if he'd thought about dating her yet. The guy didn't say anything. He just ate the apple. Then Chu-ye was a little embarrassed and said that this was the 7th time she had confessed to him. And she thinks a girl who talks about her feelings so often deserves at least some kind of response. But Kang Ji interrupted her and said it was creepy, and asked if she was still looking for an excuse to talk. The girl immediately protested and said that it wasn't like that. When she wanted to say something else, the guy interrupted and said that since it was so, let her get out of his sight. Chu-ye had tears come to her eyes, and she asked if he didn't feel sorry for her. After all, she was doing this underneath everything because she loved him. And at that moment, the boy had a flashback of his mom asking him if he felt sorry for his mother. She would also hug him and tell him that mommy only does this because she loves him. The girl came closer and closer to him and wanted to take his hand, but he pulled away. She asked him to pay attention to her already. And at that moment, Kang Ji stepped too far away, and because of that, he went over the roof and started falling down. At that moment, he thought that this was the end of him, but he had a feeling that was so familiar. And then, when the guy already thought that everything was over, he opened his eyes, but he found himself not in paradise, but saw Sid in front of him, who looked at him and asked if he was okay. A large crowd had gathered, but they immediately went to the hospital wing to be examined. The nurse, after rewrapping their scratches, asked if they were sure they didn't need to go to the hospital. Sid and Kang Ji answered unanimously that they didn't need to go to the hospital. The girl sat there and was very nervous because she had accidentally demonstrated her power in front of everyone. In general, no one should suspect that she was different, but she made a mistake like that. At this point, the nurse said it was just amazing and asked Sid how she was even able to do it. The girl from Nerves started talking fast and said that some say that in crisis situations, one becomes super strong. Of course, you can say how it could have happened, but there are many cases of people falling off roofs and being unharmed. Sid said that perhaps it was in that moment of despair that a miracle happened. The nurse laughed and said that basically anything was possible. They're seniors in high school. But anyway, she said, they could rest a little longer, for the class teacher would soon pass. Sid and Kang Ji moved to the beds to lie down for a while and gain strength. The guy suddenly wanted to say something to her, but she interrupted him right away and said he could just thank her. But he ignored her words and asked in all seriousness if she was the Hulk. Sid was very surprised to hear this, but she thought it would be best if she just ignored and didn't tell him anything. However, Kang Ji kept up with her and asked if it was time for her to confess already since she was his fan. At that moment, he started fixing his hair in a pathetic manner. Sid didn't understand why he was suddenly bringing it up, and asked why he would even think such a thing. But the guy explained that in the morning she pretended that their meeting was casual, and on the bus she behaved aggressively. It then asked with a sneer if she really thought she was the first and only one to pull something like this. Then Sid couldn't take it anymore. She started yelling and asked why she should suddenly like a bully who smoked e-cigarettes next to the kiddies, and a psychopath who tried to force his autograph on her. But at that moment, the girl suddenly felt a great pain. She started to fall and almost ended up on the floor, but Kang Ji noticed it in time and immediately picked up the girl. They were very close to each other at that moment. But at that moment, the door to their room opened and a loud female voice called the guy's name. Chu Ye walked into their room. She was shocked to see them so close to each other. The girl didn't even know what to say. Next to the girl was their class teacher. She, upon seeing them, asked immediately if they were okay. Sid, at that moment, immediately moved away from him and sat down on the bed. The teacher came closer to him. She was very indignant and asked how he had managed to fall at all and whether he was alone. Chu Ye stood there and with her gaze tried to signal him not to say anything. After all, if he told the truth, she would be finished. Kang Ji glimpsed at her and understood. Then he sighed and said that he had just made a mistake and was inattentive. He played along with the girl because he didn't really want anything to do with her. And Chu Ye was very happy that he had saved her. Well, then Situ suddenly thought about it and said that it was strange enough, because he was falling with his back as if someone had pushed him. Ju Ye, upon hearing this, became very angry. She thought that did she really need to say that? But then suddenly the teacher turned to her, asking her why she had suddenly come, and said that they should go now. Let Sid and Ji Han get some rest after what happened. At that time, everything ended peacefully. However, Ju Ye had already thought of a way to get back at her. So the next day, the girl called Sid over to talk. When she came, she immediately asked if Ju Ye wanted to say something. The girl stood with her friends and asked pathetically, "Doesn't she have a clue?" But without waiting for an answer, Ju Ye said that she looked amazing, and she thought her arms and legs would fall off because of what happened last day. Sid didn't show it. She smiled and said she didn't need to worry about it because she was fine, and thanked me for taking such an interest in her health. Then some girl who was standing together with Ju Ye got angry. She had already started to go at her and asked, "Has she gone completely crazy, or is she so dumb that she doesn't understand?" But the one stopped her in time and, coming closer to the situation, said that she had heard that the girl had transferred to this school 3 months ago. The girl said that was correct. Ju Ye continued and added that some guys say she is from Socho's neighborhood. Sid again pretended as if she didn't understand and asked, "What about it?" But then the girl smiled wickedly and said it was all a lie, because her acquaintance's brother's friend is from there exactly. But according to him, she went to Hadam High School. Ju Ye asked, and why she didn't think a girl with that name could just be picked up and forgotten. Sid was getting angry. She thought about how problems always came on suddenly and all at once. The girl wouldn't stop, and she asked, "Does Sid really think it's okay to look like this after someone fell on her from the roof? And why did she lie, since she's not from Soho?" At this point, Sid thought the lie that was supposed to protect her was about to be exposed. But she was still trying, and so she said she was really from there. Ju Ye pushed her and told her that it was all a lie, and then asked her how she would then explain that not a single kid in the school knew her. But at that moment their conversation was interrupted by a man's voice. He, seeing Sid, immediately said cheerfully, "There she is." Some blonde-haired guy came up behind her. He hugged the girl and said he went to the same school as her. Ju Ye got even more angry and she told him not to mix it up. After all, he had always been in their school. How could he have gotten into Hadam's school back then? But the guy replied in a calm voice that he had been there on summer vacation last year, attended the swim club there and met her. Afterward, he patted Sid's cheek and told her that if she didn't believe him, she could have a quiet chat with their coach. The girl was in shock at that moment. She didn't understand why he was here and trying to protect her. Ju Ye shifted her attention to her friend already, and turned to him and told him to explain himself. Kim Chun-jae indignantly said that he really did check whether or not she went to Hadam's school. It's just that the jerk is lying. Then the guy came closer to him and said it was a shame. And after that, he asked if he didn't believe him. After that, he looked at Ju Ye and with a smile on his face, he asked her how he needed to act to make her believe him. At this point, Sid, who had been silent all this time, thought that now she too had something to say. But when she was about to move closer and say something, the blonde-haired guy suddenly grabbed her head and held her. He said, "What kind of people are these people anyway? They jumped on her like some pack of dogs." He gave her a little hug around the neck and asked her if they couldn't solve all their problems themselves. Why were they all suddenly pouncing on her alone? Sid really didn't like the way he was squeezing her, and she wished he'd let her go already. But the guy didn't care. He continued to dialogue with her classmates and said that maybe it was all about a recent incident he had heard about. Ju Ye immediately shouted and asked what he was talking about. She just needed to be sure of something, that's all. Then one of her friends said that since they had already found out about everything, they could leave. They ended up doing so. When Sid's classmates were far away, she still managed to get out of his arms and asked how he knew she was here. But the guy smugly asked if she didn't want to thank him. After that, he winked and said she owed him tteokbokki. When they had a lunch break, they went straight to the cafe for some snacks. The cafe had a very interesting name, Shark Snacks, and when their order was brought to them, the guy immediately wished her a pleasant appetite. Then he suddenly began to eat everything very quickly. Sid noticed this and told him to slow down because he could choke on it. His name was Chabam Woo, and he indignantly said that she also eats fast when she is offended. Then the girl jokingly called him a pig, and he replied that, by the way, he had actually saved her. She couldn't be that sorry for the food. Then he smiled gently at her and asked her what she would even do without him. Chabam Woo is actually the school's best athlete and Sid's friend. Swimming, basketball, soccer, judo, he was good at whatever he took on. Also, he's the only one who knows about her secret about who she is, where she comes from, and why she's stronger than everyone else. Bam Woo knows absolutely everything about her, and she's insanely grateful to him for keeping it all a secret. But in fact, he's a real pig in general, and sometimes you get the impression that he has no manners at all. Soon they finished their meal. The waiter brought them the bill, which was 42,500 won. Sid, hearing the price, was shocked. She wondered how it could be more than 40,000. But the guy kindly handed them his bank card and said he would pay. Sid was surprised and asked if she wasn't the one who was supposed to pay in gratitude. But Bam Woo laughed and said that her uncle had paid for the part-time job yesterday, or she really wanted to pay it off herself. But the girl said not at all, and he had distinguished himself on all fronts that day. A real looker. Then they got out and walked toward the school. Bam Woo reached out and said he was curious about something. The girl immediately asked, "What is it?" Then he asked why Chu Ye had suddenly shown such a sudden interest in her. Sid replied that she had no idea. But then the guy got serious and told her to be more careful, because the girl looked dangerous enough. And if she gets involved with someone like Ju Ye, then you can't expect anything good from her. Then he suddenly looked at the girl and noticed that she looked kind of scared. Bam Woo smiled kindly and asked what was wrong. He kept calling her his fish. The girl ignored his question at first, and then the notification came to her and she almost shouted across the street that Ra-un was on the air. Sid forgot everything and immediately rushed back to the classroom to watch and enjoy this broadcast. Social media is a space where celebrities can interact with their fans, and underneath the guise of their love is evil. At first they are all so good, saying that they love, but in reality there are some devils lurking inside them. I've been watching the same reaction for 12 years. Jihan already feels like love and anger have merged into one. But then suddenly the boy's musings were interrupted by the joyful squeals of his deskmate, Sid. She watched her idol live and said he came out to them even without makeup. On her phone, Jihan saw the famous Ra-woon on her phone. That guy greeted his subscribers and said that they really wanted to see the rehearsal, which is why he decided to go live for them. Sid saw him and said he was insanely handsome and so cute. Then she couldn't contain her emotions and tapped her hand on the desk. But it came out a little harder than she had hoped. and Jihan's pen suddenly rolled and fell. The girl, noticing this, apologized, but the guy in a serious voice told her to pick it up now. Sid decided not to argue with him. She stood up quickly from her desk and picked up her pen. Then she held it out again, apologizing, and asked him why he was suddenly so loud. The guy ignored her question and asked if she really liked him that much. The girl was surprised at such a strange question and asked, how could Lee Ra-un not like her? He's an idle millennial with perfect looks and great skills. Of course she likes him. Plus, he's the leader of a Viv group, and she heard that they have a lot of fans among the male members. But Jihan said he's pathetic, and his groupies are disgusting. They fall in love like fools and spend a lot of money on merch. They are constantly pushing for attention, yelling and reacting to his every sneeze. It's obvious he's flattering the fans to get more money out of them. The guy asked mockingly, does she really think he's perfect? Let her come down to earth, it's only fake, just playing to the public. Jihan said that when he is at the bottom, the girl will immediately realize that her favorite is the same idiot, insensitive. Well, then Sid can't take being hurt. She can't hold back her anger. So the girl got up from the chair and grabbed him by his shirt. She looked at him seriously and told him to apologize now and take it back. At Jihan, he didn't even raise an eyebrow. He was only amused by this situation. He smiled and said that it was funny. He did rise from his chair and was taller than the girl, but very close, and asked, and what will happen if he refuses? But then suddenly their conversation was interrupted by Sid's friends. They immediately stepped between them and asked what was going on. Hiji hugged her friend and asked her why she was so angry. The girl tried to calm her down because she knew it wouldn't end well. Jihan picked up his bag at that moment and was about to leave, but then suddenly Sid asked angrily, where is he going all of a sudden? The guy, as if nothing had happened, calmly replied that he was filming. Sid got even more pissed off by this. She started yelling at him and told him not to be ridiculous. He'd just run away right after doing things. The guy was very surprised when she said he was running away. At that moment, he took her phone from the table and started watching something. Girlfriends already in yours tried to stop Sid. She wanted to take the phone away from him, but then suddenly he opened the contact book where his number was written in and asked if she was satisfied. After that, laughing, he left, and Sid was mad. Her friends were still trying to calm her down. After all this, they went outside for some fresh air and to calm down. An Haye told Sid that she had somehow gained a lot of weight and asked why she did that. The girl said he was saying nasty things about the Vivas and their fans. According to him, the guys ingratiate themselves to them to pull in as much money as possible. The girls, upon hearing this, were shocked. An Haye asked, how did she even let him live after that? When Juan intervened, she said that he should have been torn into pieces and fed to wild animals so that he wouldn't even dare to think of such a thing. Sid was shocked because the girls had been so protective of him before, saying she had been too mean to him, and now they say she should have done worse. Anya said he was just trash. The friend agreed and said it was already obvious. Well, then the girl said that Sid has his number, right? And asked if it could be given to Jihan's enemies. The girls thought about her suggestion, but really, they were too kind to do such a bad and mean thing. So Sid suggested, what better way to write some nasty stuff? The girls agreed with her and said that would be a great idea. Well, then the girls looked at the time and realized they had to get going. After all, they had a pool class coming up. At this time, Chu Ye, along with his accomplices of some of his classmates, started to bully him. The girl mockingly asked, can't he? The guy could barely hold back his tears, his body all shivered with fear, but he apologized to the girl. So she turned to her friend Chun Jae and told him if he had heard that this guy couldn't. Then the man got angry and said that if pushed, it would be deep. He kicked his foot into the wall, scaring the poor student even more. He moved closer to him and lowered his voice, and asked if he remembered that video of him swimming naked. Maybe he should send it to his mother. He turned on the camera on his phone so the guy could see his face and said he just needed to push her, which is easy to do. Chun Jae already started raising his voice and told him to answer him quickly. Does he really have a single-parent family that he acts like that? But then he laughed and said that apparently I'm all she is and changed in front of him playfully. But after that, He whispered in his ear again that he would rely on him to be a good boy anyway. Poor Jin-soo couldn't hold back his emotions any longer, so he burst into tears. Well, then the lesson began. The coach blew the whistle and said that everyone was doing great and could take a short break for 10 minutes. Sid immediately picked up her phone to check her messages, then saw that it came from Chu-yi. The girl said she wanted to talk to her and that they should meet at the tower. Sid started insulting her and said she hurts people with her filthy mouth. She doesn't know shit about them, though, and she feels sorry for her fans. The girl was already on the tower, then she couldn't stand it and suddenly screamed with all her anger. Jin-soo was all Tracy with fear, but he had to do what he was ordered to do or it would end badly. He stood behind the girl, and then he gathered all his will in a fist and ran towards her. But the guy missed a little, and there was another girl next door, and he accidentally pushed her. Sid immediately turned around to see what was going on. Then she saw Ju-on already flying down from the heights. Everyone was shocked. They began to stare and whisper. Someone shouted for them to call the teacher quickly. An-haya was very scared and said that she couldn't swim. We have to save her quickly. And at that moment, Sid didn't hold on any longer. She jumped after her friend into the water. All those who were standing upstairs were very frightened for the girl, but she was calm in the water. Sid felt much more comfortable than she did on land. In fact, she came from the sea herself. Her mother is the queen of the sea. And Sid is a child who was born from the union of a sea queen and an ordinary man. Their family had been in power for 4 generations in a row. The youngest was Coral. The middle one was named Kasatka. And lastly, she is the oldest daughter of the family. All, as well as her mother, are sea queens, namely Shark. Then Sid quickly dived for her friend and pulled her to shore. She immediately put her down on the floor. After that, she tried to wake up Ju-on. After another attempt, the girl finally opened her eyes and was very surprised to see her friend. Sid was very excited. She immediately started asking if she was okay, but she needed to go to the nurse's station right away. At that very time, Jihan was on set and they were airing. The guy was being interviewed. The host turned to him and said they had a special question for the king of actor, who starred in a responsive maiden that topped the charts in 20 countries. And the guy said that Kang Jihan said he wanted to find one person, and he asked who it was. Jihan smiled and said that he wanted to find the person who saved his life. The guy explained that at the age of 12, while filming, he accidentally fell into the sea, but someone rescued him. The host asked him to tell more about it. Jihan, thinking back, said that that girl was about the same age as him. However, he couldn't remember her face. He cried a lot that day, and she sang songs to calm him down. The girl sang very beautifully. She had a gentle voice. That voice fascinated Jihan. Moreover, that song still plays in his head at night. The host was shocked. He said it was so exciting and asked if he remembered anything else besides the song. Jihan hesitated for a moment. After that, he said that he remembered she was wearing a pendant that looked like a small sea. The guy moved closer to him and laughed and said that she was probably his first love. Now Jihan became serious, and he said it was right. First love, it was exactly her. At this time in the school, Ju-on was already taken to the nurse's station. The girl was resting on the bed. There was a teacher in the room with them, and Hay suddenly shouted and said that it was right. She had seen him run up and push her. At this moment, she pointed her finger towards Jin-soo, who was sitting on the bed with his head down because he was embarrassed. The teacher asked the boy in a serious voice why he did that, if he wanted to tell them the story. But then suddenly, Ju-ye intervened in the conversation. She smiled and asked the teacher if she seriously thought that he had done it on purpose. Surely it was just some mistake. Her friend hugged the guy and said, "Right, Jin-soo just needs to be more careful and cautious next time." Then the teacher, after listening to them, said that was right. She knew the boy was incapable of such a thing. However, Sid couldn't take it anymore. She stood up suddenly and said that no. She saw that he had pushed her on purpose. Ju-ye quickly got angry and told her not to laugh. Does she suspect her own classmate of special mutilation? But Sid objected and said that even the teacher said that Jin-soo wouldn't do such a thing on purpose. He's not that kind of person. But then she suddenly thought and turned to Ju-ye and asked why she wanted to meet her at the tower. The girl immediately became anxious, but she quickly replied that she just wanted to talk. But Sid said she never showed up. So why was Jin-soo on the tower instead of her? At this moment, Ju-ye thought that she was a real pain in the ass. Then the teacher spoke again. She turned to Jin-soo and asked him if he would help him if he told the truth, and asked if he was really forced by someone. The boy was very worried. He was silent for a while, and then he answered that, not at all. He had done it himself. Tears came to his eyes and he apologized. The guy was sobbing and said he was really sorry. He didn't mean to do that, but it just happened. The hooligans, hearing his words, could no longer contain their laughter. They could barely do so. After all that happened, the principal posted a notice on the school board about who would be punished for their acts. Sid stood, studying him carefully. She was very hurt, because she knew it wasn't the guy's fault. But at that moment, Bom Woo came up to her. He stroked her cheek and asked her how she got the bruises. Then he handed her a candy bar and told her to take it, and that he had heard that she had gone to the pool last day with Hong Ju-an. The girl confirmed and asked how he knew, since he wasn't usually interested in different rumors. The guy put his arm around her and said it was about him. Of course he would be aware of the events. If she were gone, who would he go out with then? Well, then he got more serious and asked how Hong Ju-an ended up in the water. Sid thought about it for a moment. She imagined that if Bom Woo found out who had done this to her, it would not be good. She decided it would be better not to tell him. She shrugged and said that somehow she had fallen after all. But at that moment, the guy shifted his gaze to the message board and asked why Kim Soo was suspended then. The girl replied that he was the one who pushed Young off the tower. The guy was very surprised and asked if it was true that Kim Jin-soo did it. He laughed and said that Kim Chun-jae was probably involved in the situation. Sid was surprised and asked why he suddenly thought that. Bom Woo said that he was always bullying this guy and was always making weird videos and then blackmailing other people with them. The girl, hearing this, thought about it. She was very interested in this information. At that time, the bullies were in the restroom. Chu-ye laughed and said that it was very funny. Then her friend started parodying the poor guy and repeating his words as he apologized to them. The girls laughed and said he was doing a great job. Then the guy said he was doing so well because of his video and laughed after saying that. But at this moment, Chu-ye slammed her fist into the wall and asked angrily, "Is he crazy?" The boy was very surprised, and the girl went on to say that they hadn't gotten their way. He added that he had seen Sid being rude to her in front of the teacher. But the guy didn't understand what the big deal was that she told about their meetings. The girl got angry and hit the wall again, saying she was an idiot. But she's not going to let her get away with it. Chu-ye won't screw up again. The next day, as Sid was walking down the halls of the school and looking at her phone, a man caught her attention. Looking ahead, she saw that he had come to school after all. It was Jihan. She immediately called him over to talk to him. As soon as the girl approached him, she immediately showed him her phone and asked him what his response was. The guy said hello to her, and then she said he was being an asshole and answering a message. Did he forget that she saved him? The ingrate. But Jihan didn't say anything to that. He abruptly took the girl's hand and started shoving her. Sid was very surprised at his abrupt action, but at that moment with his other hand, he caught a basketball that could have gone to her head. She stood very close to him, but then Jihan turned around and started to walk away, saying she could consider them even. Sid said he was just being rude. She thought to herself that it wasn't the most important thing right now, and looked at her watch and thought it was time. Jihan stood back and ate his apple, thinking of different things. There were some guys standing nearby talking to each other. One of them said that he had heard that Hong Ju-an had fallen from the tower yesterday. The guy said it's right because Kim Jin-soo pushed her, it's really scary. The other one said that Kim Jung-jae must have put him up to it. You could have died that way. Some of them agreed and said that isn't Kim Chun-jae the only one involved in this case. It's because Chu-ye put him up to doing this to push Sid. He also added that last time she had called her for school. At that moment, the boy remembered how she had mistreated another classmate and almost pulled out all her hair. And hearing that Chu-ye said she would kill Sid, he dropped his apple and immediately rushed to the classroom. However, At that moment, someone on the loudspeaker began to speak to the entire school. This voice said hello to the students. And then he said that everyone knows about the incident with Ju-on that happened last afternoon at the pool. The students immediately recognized Sid's voice. Well then, the girl said that there was a rumor going around the school that someone had threatened Jin-soo and made him commit an inhumane act. Then she smilingly asked who they thought it was. Was Chu-ye, who was sitting at her desk and wondered how she got on the air using the school radio. But the girl went on and said they should hear it once and they'd understand right away. And at this point, Sid played a tape where the voice says you just need to push easy. Kim Chun-jae's voice was on the loudspeaker, and the guy, when he heard it, got really angry and asked what was even going on. Chu-ye ran out into the hallway and asked for this broadcast to be stopped now. But at that moment, right in front of the girl, Sid appeared. She walked calmly into the classroom. Chu-ye immediately followed her and asked in surprise, "Was that really a recording?" Well, everyone ignored her. She turned to her classmates and asked if they were listening carefully to the broadcast. But now she's going to show them something else interesting. Chun-jae snapped at her and told her to finish already. What else could she show them there? But the girl smiled in a calm voice and said that she was about to show everyone how he would fall below the plinth. The guy didn't give the appearance of being nervous and asked, "What about the evidence? What can she do with one audio recording?" However, Sid said it wasn't about audio at all, it was about video. He filmed them himself. Did he really forget they existed? And at that moment, she turned on a video on her phone of this guy saying, "What you need to push, because it's easy." The other students crowded around, and when they saw this, they began to whisper. "They said he was crazy. It's all very strange." At that moment, Chun-jae thought that this simply couldn't be. The only videos were only on his phone. Then Sid said she would post them on social media as proof of acts of school violence, and he would be a real star. The guy got angry. He started running to her for the phone and told her to give it back, calling her an idiot. Chun-jae grabbed her arm and said that he was the one who beat up the girls, asking if she knew about it. Jihan, who had been standing back and watching all this time, was already thinking that he should intervene. However, to everyone's surprise, the girl did something crazy. Sid suddenly snatched his arm and plowed him to the floor like the last filthy rag. The girl said that apparently he never understood anything. But the guy, who was lying on the floor, didn't understand how she even got so much strength. Then the guy asked who did the pushing. It was Kim Jin-soo. He was just messing with him, that's all. He got to his feet and approached the situation and told her not to make a big deal out of what she could even do. The girl was very calm, which was quite surprising in her this situation, but then she pulled out her phone and, smiling, said it wasn't about one video, it was about all the videos he'd made. Kim Chun-jae. He made a habit of filming bullying on camera just for his own amusement. Once he bullied a guy and filming said that the punching bag acquired, and then asked him to bark like a dog and began to beat him with his feet, all this filming on camera. And there were a total of 38 such videos. Sid, telling him that she had all his files, added that he was being a jerk. The guy was very nervous about this. He immediately reached for the phone and asked for it to be given back to her. But Sid managed to remove her hand in time and said that if all those clips leaked online, he would become a real star. And then she asked if his parents knew what he was doing at school. So he got down on his knees and said with his head down that he was wrong and asked that she delete all those videos and not release them on the internet. But at that moment, Chu-ye came up to him and started pulling his arm and asked him what he was doing. But the guy protested and said that if his father found out, he wouldn't live. She knows he's a former boxer. But the girl still tried to pick it up. Then suddenly Sid spoke up and said she could remove them, but on one condition. They immediately asked what the condition was. Then she pointed her finger toward the window and asked him to push Chu-ye out of it. The girl, hearing this, was surprised. She thought, is sitting completely crazy to make such a condition? Then she screamed and said that they were on the 3rd floor. You could get killed. But Sid made an innocent face and said it would be okay. She was just kidding too. It's so much fun. She then stopped smiling and told him to choose either posting the video on social media and a reprimand from his parents. Either he's pushing Chu-ye on, After a while, she still asked, "What does he choose?" Well, then he looked out the window and looked at that height and was shocked. He took Chuye, who was standing next to him, by the arm and started pulling her towards the window. The girl resisted and asked, "Is he completely crazy?" Chunjae was very nervous that he even had sweat running down his face. But after a while of thinking, the guy stuck his head back in, sat down on his knees, and said in a trembling voice that he couldn't do that. He apologized and could barely hold back his tears. Then Sid asked if he was afraid that the videos would get out on the net or that his parents would find out. But without waiting for his reply, she moved closer and said in a serious tone that he was bullying people. So must himself experience the fear and pain they experienced while he was doing it. And after he realizes everything, she really hopes that he will reflect on his behavior and draw certain conclusions. In fact, after everything that happened at the school, the anti-violence committee was established, and Kim Chun-jae was forced to transfer to another school. All of the videos, which became a horrific nightmare for abuse victims, have been permanently deleted. And of course, some continued to be anxious about it, kept nervously checking social media, and might not even sleep at night. Ju-on ended up forgiving Kim Jin-soo for everything that happened when she found out the whole truth, and he was allowed to return to class after learning that it wasn't his fault. Chu-ya-na was furious when she heard all this. She didn't know how she was going to go to this school. Her girlfriend said she got off pretty easy. If she'd been in any of the videos, hell would have been waiting for her, just like their boyfriend. She was just lucky to be an influencer. And after that, the girl asked what she was going to do because everyone had seen what she had done. And she asked, why did Chu-ye do such a stupid thing in the first place? She thinks she'll have to lay low for a while now so she won't provoke. Sid herself was given a lot of gifts, a token of gratitude from victims who had been beaten and humiliated by bullies. Ji-han, who sat next to her while she ate, couldn't believe she was the same person. That Sid who had left the bullies in place and the nice girl who was now sitting and eating were completely two different people. At that moment, he called out to her, but the girl, without listening, told him to get away from her. Ji-han was very surprised and said that he hadn't even had time to say a word yet. But Sid said she didn't care at all what he had to say and continued eating. Then the guy asked how she even set it up in the first place. He was referring to that air that spoke for the whole school. The girl said that Ju-on had turned on a pre-made recording. But then the guy asked what about the video. Sid was surprised and said that the video was Kim Chun-jae's own doing. Ji-han asked how that was possible. The girl said she just asked him and he gave them right away. Truth be told, she has a superpower. And she asked if he knew about the sirens from Greek mythology. Beautiful nymphs living on an island surrounded by rocks and reefs. Sailors who hear the sirens' songs fall under her spell and jump into the water or perish with their ship. And in the siren's voice lies a mysterious and powerful force. Whoever hears this voice immediately becomes an obedient puppet and does everything without question. So she went to a guy one night and used her ability to ask him if he would give her what he had in his hand. The guy under her spell didn't even think twice, but I was with her about something and immediately went over and gave her my phone. And this man cannot act according to his own will. He is completely subject to the siren. Then Ji-han was surprised and asked if he understood correctly that she was using a superpower like a siren. The girl looked at it calmly and said that was right. There was nothing surprising about it for her. The guy was shocked. Well, then he said, "Does she really read any fairy tales even at that age?" Sid objected and said she didn't. Well, then he suggested maybe some weird webtoons or something. The girl knew he wouldn't believe it, so she calmly told him. Ji-han said that he thought there was something wrong with her head. Maybe she needed some checkups. But the girl told him not to talk to her, because she needed to concentrate. Then she picked up the phone and said that the K-Culture's presentation was about to begin. But at that moment, Sid started reading the news, and she noticed that there was a headline about Savior Ji-han. When she read it, she was shocked that the pendant looked like a small C. She was flipping through the news and was all shocked. But then she suddenly remembered Ji-han peeping into her phone on the bus. So she walked out of the classroom, thinking it best not to look in front of him, lest there be another misunderstanding. The girl went outside and went straight back to the news. She wondered what they were writing about. One of Jihan's fans posted the news and asked if they have already seen an interview with him. They should join forces to find that pendant that looks like a small C. There were tons more fan accounts for this guy. Sid was really surprised that he was so popular. She didn't understand why all of a sudden. Then she saw that someone had posted this interview and the girl immediately clicked on the link. At first, she didn't understand what they were all talking about, but when Jihan started telling her story from her childhood. However, the further Sid watched the clip, the more often some images popped into her head of her sitting over the boy and him crying. Well, when she heard Jihan saying that she was his first love, the girl was shocked. It was clear to her now that it meant that that boy was him. After that, Sid went to the field. She sat on the bench for the fans while the boys played basketball. Bom Woo was actually playing too. He intercepted the ball from his opponents and drove it to the ring. He jumped high and still managed to put his winning ball in the basket. Then he turned to Sid and, calling her fish, asked if she had seen his triumph. But the girl was very sad. She didn't even notice him coming up to her and saying something. The guy repeated his question and asked what she was even thinking about. Sid looked up and saw his naked torso and wondered why he undressed every time he played basketball. The guy explained that it was all about authenticity. If he's not playing topless, he's not feeling the basketball fervor at this point. In order not to embarrass Sid, he put on his sweatshirt, and afterward, he added that he could compare a similar sentiment to a granny stomp show where the granny model is obsessed with cooking. Sid was very surprised. She didn't know what the show was or why he chose to compare it specifically, but it didn't matter. At that moment, she handed him a bottle of water to refresh himself a little. Bom Woo took it and asked what she was really thinking about. Then the girl looked at him carefully and asked him if he had ever fought for his first love. Bom Woo was a little shocked at such a question, and when he was about to drink some water, he stopped halfway. He moved closer to Sid and said that yes, he was and still was fighting. Then the girl grabbed her head and asked him to just not say he had a crush on a junior high school girl. Bom Woo was surprised that she had such an opinion of him and said of course not. Afterward, he asked her if she had never been in love. The girl shook her head and said no. After that, she asked what it felt like to have first love. Bom Woo said there's nothing special about it. First you get nervous, then your heart hurts, you feel sad and all that. Sid remembered Jihan's words about first love again and asked, in that case, you can't forget even after 6 years. The guy was very surprised that she asked such a question, but said that it wasn't exactly unknown to anyone. Bom Woo, after thinking for a while, walked closer to her and, fixing her hair, said that she was hard to forget for the rest of her life. For a while they just stood there looking at each other. But then suddenly they were interrupted by the teacher's voice. He turned to Sid and asked her to bring the chalk from the warehouse. The girl immediately followed him. When Sid was already approaching the warehouse and opened the door, she didn't notice. But there was another man following behind her and watching the whole time. She took out one of the boxes and started looking for chalk. She looked through several boxes. There were many, but there was no chalk anywhere. She searched some more, but still nothing could be found. Then she picked up her phone to call for help, but noticed that her battery was dead. But then suddenly, she began to ponder aloud. She wondered why Kang Ji-han had become like this. She kept looking for the chalk and thought she didn't understand. After all, he had always been a brute. Well, he's got a pretty face. So now everybody loves him? His soul is ugly. Then Sid wondered, was that boy from the past, Kang Ji-han, really very cute as a child? And now he was different. Then the girl told herself that she must not be exposed in any way and touched her locket, which hung under her shirt. And at that moment, from the other side of the door, the man who had been watching Sid quickly locked the warehouse with a key. The girl, hearing this, immediately ran to the door. She yanked on it, but she didn't understand why it was suddenly closed. Then she felt someone's breath behind her, and then the guy put his hand on the door, touching her back. It was Jihan, whom she hadn't noticed all this time. He said it was like they were trapped. Sid was very surprised because she thought she was alone in the warehouse. When she turned around, she saw Kang Ji-han. Scared, She asked him how long he had been there. The guy sighed and said that from the moment she called him rude, he looked at the girl carefully and said that it meant she thought he had a pretty face, but an ugly soul. At that moment, Sid felt very ashamed. She realized that he had heard everything. She decided to change the subject quickly in order to somehow keep the attention off of her, and asked how they were going to get out now. Jihan says she's the Hulk after all, so just let her kick the door down. Sid didn't like it very much, but she said she didn't know how to do that. It's really not that hard to pull off. But she'd better not do anything that might arouse suspicion and expose her. Thinking about it, Sid asked if he could give her his cell phone. She would call the girls. They would get them in quickly. Jihan then sighed and said that the problem was that he hadn't brought his phone with him. Sid remembered that her phone was dead too. She didn't know what they should do now. There was no help. Just like that, a whole 10 minutes went by. Between the boy and the girl, there was a wall put up by Sid, the so-called wall of silence. It was so embarrassing for the girl that it made her want to die. She looked at the strange video, and then she had bad thoughts that wouldn't leave her all day. Sid decided to catch a glimpse of her confinement partner. Then she saw that he was looking at her too. She felt even more uncomfortable and wanted to get out. Then she said that when they came out, she would have to ask them to replace the door, since it locked itself. Well then, Jihan seriously said that someone had deliberately locked them in there. The girl was surprised and asked why he thought so. The guy explained that this door didn't close on its own because no one knew he was there. So someone wanted to play a prank on Sid specifically. The girl was surprised and asked who it could be. Jihan said that he didn't know. Perhaps someone wanted to take revenge on her because of him. The guy told her to be careful. Sid sighed heavily and began to think about who might have made such a joke. But at that moment, Jihan heard some kind of cracking noise. He immediately grabbed the girl, pulling her to him, and told her to be careful. And at that moment, some strange entity started attacking them. Sid was so frightened that she even screamed. At this time, Bo Wu had already managed to return to class. He sat on his phone and searched for a tteokbokki restaurant. Then a friend came up to him and asked him what he was doing. The guy said he was looking for a restaurant or a cafe. The guy was surprised and said he never wondered why he was looking for a diner when he had already eaten. His friend said that it was suspicious enough, but Bo Wu didn't reply anything to that. He looked out the window and saw the clouds gathering. The boy suddenly shouted joyfully and said, "Did Ik Bom Wu fall in love?" Bom Wu himself, taking the umbrella, said that everything is right, but with wit. This girl has it tight, but she is extremely beautiful. At this time, Sid and Jihan were still in the warehouse. Their danger had passed. All because it wasn't a scary beast, it was just a little kitten. Everyone sat and resented the guy, because she didn't understand how people could be used as a shield. After all, he wasn't trying to protect her. He was just shielding himself from the kitten. Jihan asked, "How else can one survive?" He smiled and added that he had such a pretty face after all, we couldn't let it get hurt. Sid got angry and asked, "Has he lost his shame?" But Jihan said that he had heard it so many times that such phrases didn't hurt him at all. The girl then petted the kitten and asked if she thought the same as the girl. But the guy protested and said that she was on his side, because he often feeds her at this place. Sid was very startled and asked how it was that he was feeding her. The boy was surprised and asked what her reaction was. But the girl said in an indignant tone of voice that he was smoking an e-cigarette next to the kitty. Jihan remembered that day and said that he had just taken it away from the hooligans.